gender equality and women's rights is a top priority in foreign policy. And this topic is crucial for Sweden, for Ukraine, and for the rest of Europe. And that's why we are, as a representative of the Swedish government, I'm extremely proud and honored to be partnering up with the Council of Europe on these important issues, gender stereotypes in media and combating gender-based violence. But this is also an issue where I'm proud to say that I'm very much personally very much engaged as well. And there's one simple reason for that. I have two children, one 8-year-old son and one 10-year-old daughter. And when I look at them, like all parents, they're the most precious thing in my life. And when I look at them, every morning and every evening, I have one big dream. And that is that they will grow up in a society where they have equal rights and equal opportunities. This is not the case in Ukraine. It's also not the case in Sweden. So even though they are born in the most gender-equal country in the world, I dare to say, if the Swedish society does not change, and the Ukrainian society does not change, my children and your children will not have equal opportunities. My son will, according to the statistics, will have a much bigger chance of having a top senior position in politics, in business, in media. But not only that, even if they would apply for the same type of work in Sweden or Ukraine, statistically, my son will earn about 20% more in Sweden. Even though they're doing the exact same thing, he would earn more. And this is simply unacceptable if we believe in a society with equal opportunity and which is fair for everyone. And I think there are different ways to promote gender equality. There are different ways to sort of combat sexism and gender-based stereotypes. But I think media is a very good starting point. Because it is in media that we see projections, that my children, when they read newspapers, the impression they get is that my daughter, she should, concentrate on being beautiful, being compassionate, and being child-friendly. My son should try to develop characteristics where he's strong, where he's courageous, and where he's smart. And of course, I don't mind if my children want to create these characteristics. I just don't want them to feel forced to develop these characteristics. Because women are 50% of the population, and we all know that women are usually smarter than men. And we need women's ability and capacity in all fields of society. The fact that Irina represents only 11% of the Rada, so only 1 out of 10 deputies are women in Ukraine, that is not that is not worthy of a modern country like Ukraine that strives to integrate with Europe. In Sweden, here we have reached further. We have about 43% of the deputies are women. We have about half of our ministers in the government are women. So there we have come a long way in Sweden. But when it comes to media and gender-based stereotypes in media, also in Sweden, we have a long way to go. And as I said, there are different ways to try to make progress in this field. One way is, of course, legislation, to look at, legislation against sexism and discrimination. In Sweden, we have an ombudsman for equality, which we have believed has worked very well. But I also think that civil society, which I always praise as the most important asset in Ukraine, which gives me the biggest hope for the future of this country. Also, civil society, I think, can play a very crucial role. And I would like to give one example of a civil society organization in Sweden that has been very successful and very important. It's called Rättviseförmedlingen. You can translate that to Agency of Fairness. It was founded by a young lady who was tired that every time she switched on Swedish TV, she would look at the panel discussion, 5 participants, 5 men. She would listen to radio on different topics, 3 invited guests, 3 men. And she called the editorial departments at the TV stations, at the newspapers, and asked, why have you only invited men? And the most common answer she got was from the editorial chiefs of the editorial departments was that we tried to find women, but we didn't find any women in this field of expertise, which was nonsense. So what she did, she started this agency based on social media, where any editorial department in newspapers, TV, can turn to when they want to have female representation on their panels or in media, or if they want to employ someone and they're looking to find a woman with that particular expertise. And this has been very helpful because now newspapers and TV channels don't have an excuse anymore for not including women in their programs. And by the way, in Sweden, a majority of the journalists are women. The majority of the reporters, but still at the top positions in the media companies, it's predominantly male. The second important topic that we're discussing here today is, of course, the Istanbul Convention. The World Bank recently presented statistics according to which every year 700 million women are victims to gender-based violence, domestic violence. 700 million women. Of course, I think you and me as a Swede, and Jean as come from Belgium, think that, well, this is probably not a European problem. Be sure, it is a European problem. It's a Swedish problem, a Belgian problem, and moreover, it's a Ukrainian problem. In Ukraine, every year, hundreds of thousands of women are being victims of gender-based violence. We are very happy that Ukraine has signed the Istanbul Convention. And as a representative of the Swedish government, we are happy to do everything we can to support Ukraine also to ratify this convention and to harmonize its legislation in order to allow for ratification. And I think this is particularly crucial right now. I think we all share one hope in this room, a hope that the Russian aggression against Ukraine will stop. And when that Russian aggression against Ukraine stops, and the Ukrainian soldiers return home, many of them will be heavily traumatized, having gone through awful experience that we cannot even imagine how awful they have been. They will return home to their wives, to their children, and I'm very worried that we will see an increase in terms of the problem of gender-based violence because of this as well. So I think the time to act is now. We're running out of time, and I can assure you that Sweden will do everything we can to help Ukraine to make progress on this as well. Thank you so much.
Дуже дякуємо вашій ясновельможності. Зараз Жан де Лануа, перший секретар Посольства Королівства Бельгії в Україні. Прошу.
Thank you very much. I'm very humbled to speak after Andreas, who has been so much involved in the defense of gender equality and women's rights. I start from a more modest position. I'm here, because Belgium ensures for the moment the presidency of the Council of Europe, and we want to use this chance to support as much as we can the Council of Europe in its defense of human rights in Ukraine and elsewhere. And so I'm very honored to have the occasion to address you at this conference on gender equality. Belgium is, like Sweden and also like the new Ukrainian government, deeply committed to the defense of all aspects of human rights and gender equality in particular. And sorry, I'm, however, humbled to speak to you also because as a diplomat, I'm from a profession that is still deeply unfair to women. As Andreas was saying, in, I think, all countries, we struggle to find an equal number of women and male diplomats. And this is because I think the profession is still unfair in multiple ways to women. I'm here going to use traditional categories, but the first way the profession is unfair is because women can be afraid that their husbands or potential husbands would be unwilling to jeopardize their prospects of a career in order to follow them. And of course, then in most of the cases, it happens to be men, and their wives then also are discriminated because we still struggle to find ways to give them equal opportunities. And this example of our job shows how much achieving gender equality requires changes in many spheres, in mentalities, as well as in law and daily practice. And indeed, some fundamental rights, such as women's rights to physical safety, were not so long ago considered, even by law, as domestic matters in which the state should only intervene in extreme cases, if at all. Today, we no longer accept that women could be beaten, raped, or killed if that would be considered normally in their cultures. This is an extreme case, but it shows how important your work is in defining and endorsing universal rights in order to ensure gender equality. Even and especially if those rights go beyond what is considered the norm in our respective countries and families. Therefore, in the name of my country and with my deepest personal support, I wish you a very intense and productive conference in order to contribute to gender equality in Ukraine and the world.